Gunung Tidar is a hill above Magalang, to the north of Jogja, Yogyakarta, close to Candi Borobudur and Gunung Merapi, a very active volcano. It's therefore almost at the very centre of Java, and is said to be an anchor where Java is nailed to the earth, but also meaning where the underworld meets the world. Whilst the literal translation of anchor is simply haunted, to the Javanese it means much more. Thus, Gunung Tidar is an auspicious place that is treated with reverence. Since the new Java Troll Road has opened, the bus does sometimes take this route, although it's much quicker via Solo. Thus we often go via Solo. Whenever I go through Magalang, I'm struck by the importance of Gunung Tidar. Both routes now go through Semarang, where I always look for Wewe Gumbel, the ghost of an old lady who kidnaps children, but I've never spotted one. Gunung Tidar contains the graves many ancient graves of Chinese Indonesians. Indeed, along the road from Jogja and Magalang, one can see many such cemeteries on the hills, especially close to Candi Borobudur. This is somewhat unusual in Indonesia, where the Chinese tend to be concentrated in urban areas. Maybe these were Chinese indented agricultural labourers to the Dutch. Gunung Tidar also contains the graves of Sheikh Subakir, along with other early Islamic teachers, and allegedly that of Semar. These are a little higher up the hill than the Chinese cemeteries. I say allegedly Semar, as for me Semar is a Wang character. Yes, a legend with a strong allegorical meaning, but not a legend that would have a grave, and certainly not one as modern as at Gunung Tidar. Nevertheless, these are prior to most of the Wali Songo saints, who are accredited with bringing Islam to Java. The occupants of these graves have been sent by the Ottoman Sultan to discover why so many missionaries had failed to return from Java, and told to engage in trade rather than violence. One of the spirits said to be disturbed by Sheikh Subakir was believed to be Semar, the most powerful spirits on Gunung Tidar. Somewhat interchangeable with Semar is the tale of Sabdo Palon. Sabdo Palon fought with Sheikh Subakir on Gunung Tidar for 40 days and 40 nights. The resulting agreement is that 9 ulama could preach Islam in Java, but must never use force. Furthermore, the rulers of Java could convert to Islam, provided they did not forsake their culture, although the first rulers must come from mixed parentage, i.e. Muslim and Hindu/Buddhist. Finally, the people of Java are not Arabs, nor should ever be. They must be allowed to continue their rice culture. Therefore, the legend seems to be very much part of the integration of Javanese beliefs with Islam. By and large, Java became Muslim without bloodshed. Therefore, it is a part of the syncretism which facilitated the development of Islam. Of course, this was a time of competing kingdoms, and with some bloodshed and some forced conversion, but very limited compared to other countries, be they Muslim or Christian, despite most countries from people from outside refusing to believe this, especially Indian Hindus. Indeed, a part of the compromise was that Java should keep its rice culture, which I believe indicates that Java should never lose its culture, but also it illustrates how this area is believed to be a focus for the interaction between the world of man and that of the paranormal. Even today in Indonesia, when a natural disaster occurs, it's claimed to be a result of the legacy of Sabdo Palon. Maybe it's a 19th century creation, or possibly a 20th century creation of 19th century prediction. Indeed, there are many suggestions that it was the creation of Dutch hegemony. In the past, I've spoken about hegemony and how we create our reality. Should we ask to what degree such predictions shape our expectations, and therefore reality. In other words, are all prophecies inherently self-fulfilling, especially if they're widely believed? The past is only the present become invisible and mute, and because it is invisible and mute, its memorised, glazed and murmurs are infinitely precious. We are tomorrow's past. And that was Mary Webb. Despite having spent much of the last 20 years in Indonesia and experienced many earthquakes, I cannot say that I've ever felt one. Then one night in Gunung Tidar, I did. It came from the Indian Ocean, but not so far from our home. After returning to Jakarta, one even closer to our home struck. Around the same time, the Gunung Merapi started to rumble, although this is hardly rare, and there was flooding all across Southeast Asia. Nothing unusual during the monsoon season, but in Indonesia it was a dry season. Is this not evidence that Sabdo Palon has awoken? After all, Epstein, Maxwell, the Duke of York and Johnson have all been exposed, and many more will follow. Then a tornado destroyed the Pfizer factory in North Carolina. If this isn't divine justice, then what is it? I became convinced that Sabdo Palon's awakening would mean that everyone involved in deceit, greed and control would be exposed and punished. That all we needed to do was to ignore the psychopaths and narcissists that have led us to near Armageddon. Ultimately, they would flee to their new capitals, private islands, tax havens and hobbit houses in New Zealand, before realising they'd created their own post-apocalypse prisons. But of course they will push ahead with their illogical schemes, regardless of them being doomed to fail, as it is our resources which are being wasted on these schemes, not theirs, and there is a lot of money to be made on pursuing them, just as there is in pursuing wars and proxy wars around the planet. Thinking of my adopted country, Indonesia, it has many problems, but maybe two of the most pernicious are corruptions and politicians being out of touch with their electorates. Yes, Jakarta sinking is fairly important, but nobody has the will to truly tackle it. Nevertheless, if these are the problems, how is building a new capital 1,500 kilometres away even remotely a solution? The same could be said for AI, digital passports, telemedicine, central bank digital currencies, digital authoritarianism, universal basic income, social credits, etc., etc. They are all doomed to failure, as they are all half-witted attempts to solve problems that really aren't important to mankind. Now, if technology and human intelligence could be focused on psychopaths, greed, inequality, fear and hatred, just maybe we could at last develop something which might at least have a chance of being successful. In fact, isn't this how we're all preoccupied with the mundane? We're asked to choose between pointless choices which don't address the real issues. Yes, this is a tactic derived from electoral politics, or is electoral politics simply one manifestation of it? When you consider how impossible it is becoming to consume anything, and the squeeze on the wealth of even the middle class, it all seems so deliberate. I refuse to believe in the theories of an evil genius. It is as though this is a natural development of greed and psychopathy. That, as Marx predicted, capitalism is destroying itself. Some might argue destroying humanity itself. For so many of us, it is no longer the fear of death, but the fear of living that consumes us. But I remain somewhat hopeful. For when the state and big business can no longer take care of our basic needs, we need to look elsewhere and begin to live as God intended. Despite having mentioned Marx, I assure you this is not a political statement, as all politics have been destroyed by psychopathy. The Frankfurt School was preoccupied with merging Marx with psychology, and why the proletariat had failed to have a revolution. But even this has been subverted by ridiculous concepts of cultural Marxism. Maybe had they been focused on Freud's work on narcissism, as he has little to say on psychopathy, but they would have come to similar conclusions as I. But unlike me, they would not have had access to the work of Andrzej Lobachowski. No, my views represent a faith in God and humanity. Wherever love becomes humble, those who have love, so to speak, pawned a part of their narcissism, Sigmund Freud. But were all my experiences of psychopaths, narcissists and black magic not sent so that I should comprehend something even more profound? I did not choose an interest in magic, it chose an interest in me. My experience as a victim of black magic reminded me of when I could fly and speak with plants and animals without too much difficulty. Of course, we all did this, but as a result of schooling and socialisation, we've developed a collective amnesia and lost our confidence to repeat these acts. This book began with me learning to speak with plants and animals and to fly again, slowly and hesitantly at first. After all, we have to abandon so much learning and beliefs. But now I can feel this happening, and the change is palpable as I step back into my power. People don't have ideas, ideas have people. My tarot seemed to be suggesting that I hadn't completely grasped the direction for mankind. And I hadn't. Why should everything be personal to me? Shouldn't I simply submit? We're all so egotistical that we interpret everything personally, either that we created something or that this is fate. I have spent 12 years trying to explain why I was a victim of black magic, even repeating these thoughts in this book. But maybe I should simply ask, why not? I was there in front of my predator brother-in-law, so why wouldn't I be a big victim? I doubt if those who are attacked by lions or sharks spend much time asking why me. And I should now move on, seeing this as 12 years wasted. 12 years in which I have allowed my brother-in-law's actions to dominate my thinking, which of course is my definition of black magic, but it's also how black magic works. Indeed, could those physical issues I experience and call signs of magic be the body's warning that it senses a predator? We subconsciously are aware of danger when we meet a psychopath, and it creates these physical symptoms. Strangely, there is some evidence that this is exactly what's happening via the bacteria in the gut that I have mentioned. In particular, this results in cortisol imbalance, which is the reason why I keep getting inflammation reactions, especially rheumatism in the mornings when cortisol is highest. Furthermore, constant high cortisol actually leads to low motivation, which is why black magic seems to result in bad luck, making us believe this is fate. Early on, I pondered if black magic worked through hormones. Well, I was correct, but I had no idea how complex it was, that the holistic healing is a long and complicated process with no fixes. Maybe I can best illustrate this with a story from my youth. As a teenager, I met Billy at a village dance. I immediately knew that Billy was dangerous and steer clear, but being an empath, I was attracted to Billy and believed I could charm him into not harming me. Seriously, how many of us can actually charm a lion or a snake? After a few years, I moved to the next village, where Billy lived. One summer's evening, Billy spotted me strolling with a local girl. He immediately set upon me. I gave no resistance, which I will explain shortly. He knocked me to the ground. Feigning concern for me, he lifted up my head, asking if I was all right, and proceeded to pound my face with his fists. Such behaviour is typical of psychopaths and narcissists. Most of us recognise them and give them wide berth, but there are some of us who believe that charm is better than flight, always to our detriment, but we never learn. As a child, every Saturday afternoon I was transfixed in front of the television. Remember, my parents had a business and left me to my own devices. Why was I transfixed? Well, the television showed the wrestling matches between the likes of Mick McManus and Jackie Pallo, from exotic locations like Bridlington Spa and Cleethorpes Memorial Hall, though just occasionally from Shrewsbury Music Hall. I would play with the other boys, pretending to be Mick McManus and practising my grappling holds, even challenging strangers to fights. But once I became a teenager, I completely lost interest in such activities, preferring to grapple with girls. Thus I never protected myself nor fought back if attacked. I really don't know why, but I suspect it's related to my experience of narcissism and sense of victimhood. So the magician's only power is suggestion, or maybe not a power at all, but the subconscious reaction is exactly what we see as indicative of black magic. Particularly in the West, we're taught to ignore these subconscious signs. Remember that the reaction I had to my cousins mentioning my mother's narcissism. It was like calling for help from a pride of lions. Well, the narcissist also managed to create these reactions in those around them. They are taken into the fantasy, and therefore the victim becomes the predator in their minds. I have to conclude that even my father, God bless him, a big part of this fantasy. And maybe in his very last year he began to see through it. Maybe, but it was already far too late. Thus my reaction was to distance myself from my parents. Was this the best reaction, as is distancing myself from Branwell? I was not able to help my father, nor Branwell, as only they can help themselves. Maybe this explains why in Kajawa we believe that the use of magic results in 7 generations of bad karma. I do hope it doesn't actually last 7 generations, but be mindful that those who have been affected by a narcissist or psychopath will be stuck in a doom loop, or a death cult if you like. The covert narcissist's victimhood is projected onto the world. Hence my doctor, my mother's helper, and my cousins took pity on my mother, placing the blame on me. All too often narcissists and psychopaths see their misfortune as fate. But our reaction is also one of shutting down all but our own limbic system, so we're simply in survival mode, unable to thrive, yet again projecting an almost magical definition on the world. And again, why would we need to submit to Allah? Yes, recognising that we have self-determination and rejecting this idea of magical fate. This is the reason why, as I began to recover insights into my position and the world, felt like downloads, as suddenly part of the brain which I could not access became available to me once more. That's right, when engaged in this survival mode, we have limited brain function, and seemingly everything goes wrong in our lives. Only when we start healing can we attract what we would see as luck once more. But it's not luck, just healthy decision making. Yes, everything is being done in a state of fear. Addictions like greed, control and authoritarianism can creep in, but the underlying energy is one of fear. I may never get the opportunity to explain to my brother-in-law and his enlisted Dukans that they have nothing to fear from I, nor indeed the world's elite. But maybe in writing this book I'm doing exactly that. For when we stop responding to the fear porn, to the threats of violence, repression, even of nuclear Armageddon, what is left? Indeed, isn't Armageddon itself a construct? A construct which leads to concepts of heaven and hell as being separate from our lives, somewhere after the end, But such notions of Armageddon are comparatively modern, shaped by the other construct of time. For our preoccupation with the temporal. For if there is no time, there is no ending, nor beginning, just cycles. If we are talking of cycles, just maybe in heaven and hell are here on earth, and are reflections of high and low points within these cycles. But what does this tell us about life and death? Could it also be a cycle, as the Buddhists believe? Thus, through love, we raise our vibrations and can be happy in the face of adversity. Like my Duke and brother, those responsible for these crises will be full of fear that we have harnessed the same control mechanisms as they, unable to comprehend exactly how. Also, like my Duke and brother, he will be fearful of the other Duke he has been working with, believing that they are double-crossing him. But a lion does not have remorse, only hunger and an impulse to stalk its prey. Returning to why me, well, maybe there is a factor which partly explains this. You see, Maddie, and to a far lesser extent I, are eternal victims. Just as animal predators smell fear, so too do psychopaths like my brother-in-law. So when confronted by an animal predator or a psychopath, we must be brave and let them know we have no fear, even though our instinct is to run. But then the real twist came. My tarot readings told me that they were acting out of fear and ashamed of their part in this mess. You may recall my stories of Professor Darwin. He would disappear for months, only to re-emerge with another scheme or fantasy. Or was his disappearance the result of fear or even being ashamed? Of course, he would not accept blame and blame others, myself included. But he may have been ashamed that his scheme failed. The tarot continued that my impulse to walk away and turn down the institutions that had served us in the past was unnecessary. No, we must rebuild civil society and the checks and balances that had worked so well in the past. Yes, this was an age of deference that has been destroyed forever, but now it must be based on community and not individual interest, and above all based on love. So it's not my belief about my beliefs, but communal beliefs that I may only challenge when blatantly driven by fear. Well, that ends this chapter. Let me emphasise once more that this is only a novel. I have mentioned real life people, it is based on real life events, but it is a novel, and I hope I haven't offended anybody. I have changed names when necessary, and I hope you enjoyed it.